Thank you everyone for joining me on Friday afternoon as we head into our weekend. Happy World Teachers Day to everyone. Today we are looking at Google Forms for this workshop, and I'm going to basically walk you through how to create a Google form, how to section it off, all those types of things. It'll start very basic, but then we will build up into the more advanced aspects of Google Forms. So please, if you are familiar with Google Forms, just bear with me until we get everyone up to scratch. So the first thing you want to do is just go to forms.google.com. Forms.google.com. Google's pretty smart. It works out that you actually want it to be at docs.google.com/forms, etc. And then you should have a page that looks a bit like this, depending on how many forms you've made recently. You can see I like my forms. It'll just keep loading if I keep scrolling. And so today I'll show you basically how to create a form. I'm going to show you how to customize it, the different types of questions that exist. I want you to know how to add sections and then how to create quizzes using forms, and also how to go beyond the basics of what forms does to actually think about maybe doing things like creating build your own adventures using forms, which is a really cool thing that you can do in here. So I'm going to start by clicking this button here on the left to create a blank form. And so here we are with the untitled form. The first question just gets automatically put in there, and it's a lovely purpley color at the top. So first thing you want to do is give your form a title, test form. Okay, you can call it whatever you like. Once you've called it, given it a name, click up here and it will name up there for you as well. You can give it a description here. So this is where you want to put in any instructions that your students might need or that your teachers might need if you're going to send the form to your teachers. So this is really a great place for just basically saying what the purpose of the form is. I've sent ones out before where I've embedded YouTube clips or images into this section. So if I click here, for example, I can search YouTube. So the one I always search for is energy systems. So I can insert this straight in there. And so now I have a section that's just got the video in it by itself. Okay, if I go back up here, I can insert an image. And again, I can just search. And if I want a frog, here's my lovely frog, and I can stick that in my form. And there's my frog. And so you can see that they're inserting just underneath here where I was. But up here, I can also put in a new section. I can put in a title of some kind of description. I can import questions. This is a new feature. I'll show you that in just a moment when I get to adding questions, and this is how you add questions just there. So this is just a basic beginning. So test form. So this is a made up form for my webinar. Okay, so fairly basic thing there. This form is automatically collecting email addresses. That's because I've got that as my settings by default to do that, but you don't have to have that. So you can insert images and videos. You can give them titles. They're by themselves. You can do it in a question as well. So if I'm actually in the question, I can insert the video and it will come up like that, and then you put your question underneath it. Now, when it comes to the question, so wherever you are, you could have been here and you could have just clicked add question. It'll just add another one below. Okay, but let's go to this question here. One thing to know about Google Forms is that it is actually really so it is intelligent. So as I start to write here, if I put the word select the correct, and you'll see that straight away it's switched over to multiple choice. If I can spell correct. That's not how you spell correct. Okay, straight away it's gone to multiple choice. Now if I put choose from the drop down, should then see this has changed now to drop down. So depending on what question you put in there, Google will automatically change this according to the kinds of questions that you ask. And so you'll see, if I say choose from drop down, it's a drop down. And so then what my first option might be Google webinar. Okay, I might also have an authentic assessment webinar, etc. And so I can put all my choices in there. Okay, the bottom right here says required. So I can choose to make this question a required question. So you cannot submit the form without answering that. You also have these three little buttons where I can add a description. I'll do this in a minute, show you how to go to a section based on the answer. And then you can also shuffle the options. I like to shuffle options. It means it's not always one or two. So if you do multiple choice, for example, if the answer is C for one student, it might be A for another student, or D for a different student. And that helps to keep things nice and valid and reliable for your assessment types. So they're your basics of creating a question. There are so many different types of questions here from Google. So short answers are for basically if you want like 3 words or something like that, just looking for one line. If you want people to write more, you can select a paragraph and they can write as much as they like. Multiple choice checkboxes is like multiple choice, except they can choose more than one. So you would choose all the correct options, right? And then you'll have option 1, option 2, option 3. And so then when I preview it, which you can do up here, you'll see now I can select more than one. Whereas if it's a multiple choice, you could only select one of the options. So that's what checkboxes do. You have drop downs, you've probably seen those. You can do file uploads as well. So files will be uploaded to the owner's Google Drive. So it goes to my Google Drive because I'm the owner of this Google form. And respondents will be required to sign into Google when the file upload questions are added to the form. Right, so you can just click continue. And then you choose what type of file you want the students to upload. So maybe you want them to upload an image for you or a PDF for you, and it will make sure that what they upload is the correct thing. You can limit how big the file is or how many files you want them to upload. And then basically it could accept up to 1 GB of files. Okay, so this is really good if you're having students gather evidence for a portfolio or something. You can actually have them take photos of the work that they're doing and upload it through a Google form for you to have a look at. They could upload videos, they can upload PDFs, documents, anything that they like to share it with you, and the document will be shared and put into your Google Drive so that you actually become the owner of the document. Now, that's a really cool one. Let's scroll down here to the other question here. You can also do linear scales. So these are your questions where you might ask people to rate the presenter's knowledge of Google Forms, for example. Might be something that I'd ask in a survey for you guys. And so 1 would be terrible with a 2 R's, hopefully. And 5 would be excellent. Okay, or you can put whatever you like for those, make it required. You can make the scale go 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, anything you like. So you could have just a 1 to 2 score if you want, or a 1 to 3 score, and that's a linear scale. You can shift that as well. So if I want to go from my general multiple choice, now I want a multiple choice grid. A multiple choice grid is different again. So here you have your rows and your columns, and so this is when there is only one correct answer, and this is going to give you a table layout. So if I click here and just add a couple of columns and rows, then you will be able to have a look at these columns and rows when I go to the preview, and I'll preview all this in a minute. But this is your multiple choice grid. If I create another question, I can make this a grid checkbox. So this is now the same as this, but if I want them to be able to select more than one as we go down. So this might be, for example, if they're selecting all the different sports that they have ever done. You might have, the ones they do in summer and the ones they do in winter, and they can select multiples. Or you might ask them to do their favorite, and then they have to select just have them select one. So again, I can make it required, a response in each row. And then as I move between them, you'll see it changes to look like what the question is going to look like. And generally, you should make sure you actually give some instructions for what they should do with your checkboxes. So now let's add a section. So this is a section. When I click it, it's going to go to, and you'll see here it says after section 1, continue to the next section. Now, if I have lots of sections, and particularly if they're titled, so let's call this one section 2. If you have lots of them, then what you actually can do is once they finish this, you can say, all right, you can actually skip the next section, or they can go to submit the form or anything. So you can actually have kids jumping around in the form. They don't necessarily have to go from section 1 to section 2. Now in section 2, I might choose to add a whole bunch of another description of what it is, or call it something else. But now I want to put in a different kind of question. So this time it's a date question. And so you can see that default is American. You can change that, and hopefully if your Google admin has changed it, it should come up with day, month, year for you based on where you're at if you're based in Australia. But it's just important if you see that it comes up like this to mention that in your actual question. So you might say, when were you born, or when was something signed or something, and then just put month, day, year. It'll just help make sure that the students are allowed to, because what this is going to do is verify that the answer is actually a date, and if it's not a date, they can't submit it. Another kind of question might be for a time, and so now it has to be an actual time that they put in, and so it might say, when does school start? For your kids who are constantly late, make them answer that question 100 times. And they have to make sure they put in an actual time, and so it'll have to have AM and PM, and that's all they'll be able to put in there. If I go up here to let's make a short. So I'm scrolling around a bit there. I'll come back. If I add another one and make it a short answer question, down here you can do a response validation. Now, a response validation is like what's happening in these two questions up here, where it's month, this has to be a date, and this has to be a time. If I do response validation, I can decide that the answer has to be a number, and it has to be greater than a certain thing. Otherwise, they won't be able to enter it. It'll come up and say that there's error. Or maybe I want to choose how long the answer can be. And so I might say, okay, your maximum character count, or minimum character count, so that when a student's answering this question, they actually have to write at least 20 characters. Okay, otherwise they cannot submit it to me. And that's a cool little feature within forms, particularly if you're thinking of helping your students to develop their writing, or maybe that could be by making them write more, or it might be by helping them to write less and to really think about refining what they're writing down to something that is more meaningful for the people who they're targeting with it. Now, the final thing that I really like to do with my forms is when I have a multiple choice question. So this one's multiple choice. Let's just go choose A or B, right? And so option 1, this one will be A, this one will be B. Now, the last thing I really like to do is this. So if I click here, and I can click go to section based on answer. So I can click here, and let's say this is a build your own adventure type thing instead of a kind of a quiz of type thing that I've created here. But if this is a build your own adventure, I could have images and videos in there, and then I could have something that says, the description might be a bit of a story, and then there might be that the students have to choose whether or not they go into the door, or do they stay and go upstairs instead. So maybe they're in the house, something's going on outside, they hear a sound. Do they open the door and go outside and check it, or do they go upstairs and hide in the bathroom? And so you might have option A is the bathroom, and option B is to go outside. And so if they choose option B, they then go to section 3, But if they choose option A, they're going to go to whatever section you like. Let's say they go back to the first section. But if you had 3 or 4, 1,000 sections, you could choose which sections to send them to. And so this then means that as they choose their adventure in this story, they're actually going to skip over to the next bit of the story where, if they choose A, the story then talks about them going upstairs and hiding in the bathroom and what happens next, and then they get their next choices. But I also like to use this for revision. So I have, if you didn't see it, I'll open it up for you. We're doing forms. In my lovely forms, I have a really cool one down here called Sports Medicine Revision. And in this revision form, this has lots and lots of different sections. And so you can see this is the topic that they're looking at. I'm collecting their email addresses so that I know who's actually answering the questions. And as they go through, there's a question, and then they go to a section based on their answer. And so this is just very slow internet loading up an image here. And so when my students come here and they answer the question, you can see here, if they get it wrong, they go to section 4, which is a review. And if they get it right, they go to the next question. So if they get it right, this is where they are for the next question. If they get it wrong though, they're going to section 4. And here I am, there's a video that's explaining the content to them again. And then after this, they will actually go back. So this is wrong here. That should say go back to section 1. And so they're going to get here and do the summary and then go back to the question they got wrong and have to get it right. And so with this quiz that I have here, I use this for revision quite frequently. My students cannot finish this quiz without getting everything right. And so as they go through, they just constantly sent back around. They get sent to the content, so they actually learn the content correctly, and then they have to go back. Each one is given a mark out of 1. And so as they go through here, they need to make sure that everyone is really working hard to get to the right answer. So that's something I've built here, and I really would encourage you to use that kind of a system where you have, okay, well, if they get the right answer, then move them on. But if they get the wrong answer, this is allowing straight away for really good feedback, a chance for them to learn. And so you can embed, you could just be writing something, you could write something that helps them to answer that question and get it correct, and then they'll go back. Obviously, this only works with things like multiple choice, where there's set answers that are in there. If it's a written response, you won't be able to do that the same, because it's not going to auto-mark a written response for you. But that's a really cool, nifty thing that you can do here in Google Forms, which is that whole build your own adventure type style of progression, or using it to make sure that you're guiding your students to make sure they're learning. And so you could build a whole bunch of stuff into this. I love to flip my classrooms, and so I'll often have videos with questions underneath it that relate to the videos, and they have to get those questions right before they can submit it, which forces them to go back and rewatch the video, find out where they've missed things to answer that question. And I will also use those questions. I'll have an open-ended question at the end for their summary to write, and then I'll use one of my settings to actually send them an email with all of their answers. And so straight away they saw all their answers, and they can see their summary that they've written in an email that's sent to them automatically, that they've done by answering a question. Or the other thing I might do is I won't have multiple choice. I'll just have guided questions that help them to produce their summary. And when they've written it, it'll email it to them. So let's have a look at that. So to look at that, we have to go up here to the right-hand side. Now, I will just divert for 2 seconds. You can see here it says Customize Theme. This button basically is about changing the color up here, or you can choose an image. If you choose image, you're just going to upload something or find something from all the ones that are pre-made for you. So if you're a music teacher, you might choose something that's got music in it or whatever. So you just click select, and it'll stick the image up the top here. And then it changes the background. You can change your background color here as well. And you can change your font styles to make it different, more playful. Generally keep it basic, because otherwise your students who struggle to read are going to really struggle to read. But they're your options. You can upload your own image if you want as well. But that's there. That's this one. Here, this is your preview. So I already clicked that for you, and we could see what the quiz looks like if you want to see what it's going to look like for your students. And then this is your settings. And so in your settings, you have your general settings. So mine are automatically set to collect email addresses. Here, they're going to get response receipts, and that's what I'm talking about. So here, I can say that they're going to get it if they request it. So it'll have a button at the end. Do you want to receive an email with all of your answers to the questions? Or I can say they just always get it and they don't have a choice. They're going to get that email. And so to start with, they have to enter an email that's a correct email. And then they're going to get a response receipt. And so you can even go here, respondents receive a copy of their responses. And that's really cool because it just means that if they write a summary or whatever they've written in there, they're going to get a copy of it as evidence. Even if something magically happens to Google and that doesn't work, they can have a look at their emails and they'll have that. The next section here is requires sign in. So I can choose to make the people be from my school or from my domain. So this will be whatever normally it'll be DET.New South Wales or something, or DOE possibly. I think it's uses the education one. But I often just unclick that so they don't have to be from there. That way it doesn't matter if they've used any of their email addresses, particularly if I want to get you guys to fill this in. If I leave this ticked, you won't be able to answer this form. I can choose how many times they can answer the form. So I might say they can only answer it once, particularly if I'm going to make it a quiz. But if you want, for example, students to reattempt quizzes to show mastery of the content, and they can't move on to the next bit of content, for example, until they show that they have mastered this content, you might allow them to answer multiple times so that they can constantly go back and check and improve their answers. After they click the submit button, this is asking respondents can. So they can edit after submit. So if they click submit, they don't get the right mark, they can click edit and go back into their same Google form and adjust all their answers. Or you can also let them see a summary, charts, and text responses. So that means if it's A, B, C's, for example, they'll see how many people chose A, how many people chose B. If there's text responses, they'll see all the written responses that people have put in there. And so that might be a way to show them the answers, for example, if it's a quiz type thing. Here, the maximum size for files, because I've turned that on when I put in the question that allows people to upload files. So this is your general settings for Google for our forms. Let's just allow them to edit. They can see the summaries, and I will limit to one response. Well, now I see that's automatically removed that, so I better leave that off so they can edit it. Then I click presentation. Now, particularly when you use lots of sections, I would advise that you do show the progress bar. The progress bar is that bar that says, you're 30% through, you're 60% through, and now you're finished, or whatever you're looking at. It allows students to see how much longer the quizzes or the form is going to take. You can also shuffle the question order. So if this is a quiz, for example, I might want students to be answering all different questions at the same time. So they'll all start on a different question and finish on a different question. And that's all going to be randomized. And then if I want, I can show them a link to submit another response if I want more of them. And then finally here in presentation, you can provide a custom message when they actually click the submit button. So you can tell them, thank you for your feedback. Right? So maybe they were providing you with feedback on one of the units that you just did with them, and they've been answering all your questions for them, and so you say thank you for that. You might tell them they're a star, whatever you want to do in that sense. Okay, and so if I click save, that'll close that, but I'm going to go over here to quizzes as well. So one of the great things about forms is that they've recently changed things so that you could turn a Google form, which used to just be more of a survey system, and now you can use it as a quiz. And so when I click this and it turns over, now suddenly I have all these other options. So do I want them, once they actually finish the quiz, to see the grades straight after they submit it, or later when I review it and send it out to them? So that might be, if it's all multiple choice, you can probably just leave this one on. But if you're having them actually write extended responses or short answers that you need to check, you might click this and manually review the marks before you send out the emails that go to them that tell them what mark they actually got. After they submit it, do you want them to see the questions that they missed? Do you want them to see the correct answers and the points values? So just think about how many times you're going to have your students going in or out of this. So how many times do you want them to go through and answer it. So if they've seen their missed questions, so you hover over the question, identify which questions were answered incorrectly. So that's what that's going to tell them. And then here, the correct answers, this is going to show them the actual correct answers. So you'll see now, when I save this and go back into my quiz, things are going to change a little bit. So now when I go down here to my multiple choice question particularly, let's find that one. So this one now, you'll see on the left, I've now got these answer keys. And so if I click that, now it wants me to say which one is correct and how many points this question is worth. So my default is that it's worth 1 point. I'm going to say A is correct, but then I'm also going to provide some feedback. So if they give me the incorrect answer, I'm going to say, maybe they misunderstood something. You misunderstood, that 2 negatives make a positive, for example, right? Whatever it happens to be, just make it specific. And you can see here, I can link to things. So I could add a link to a website that explains what they got wrong in more detail, or I could insert a video from YouTube that'll explain things that they got wrong. And then also for correct answers, I can say, awesome work, great job, or great effort. And I might put a link to a little clip that celebrates their success or something. These are just simple little features within here that allow that automatic feedback to happen for your students, which I think, this will take more time to begin with in setting up your quiz, but once it's set up, you don't have to provide the feedback. It'll all be there for them, ready to go, and you can use it year after year after year, as long as your content doesn't change or as long as the skills you're checking don't change. I particularly love using this across a school. For example, if you're trying to develop your students' spelling and grammar, then you can set this up to automatically mark, and students will have to go through. You can get them to do it every week, have a different quiz that's checking spelling and grammar at different levels. You set it all up once, and that's it. You can then just sit back and watch year after year after year your students doing these spelling, grammar, numeracy type activities to help develop those skills for their life outside the classroom. Now, obviously, I would want you to do more than just these quizzes to develop those types of things in your students, and make sure you're doing real world activities and real world authenticity to your assessment there. But it's a nice, easy tool to allow your students to get that automatic feedback that doesn't require lots and lots of time from teachers. Let's face it, some teachers probably need to be checked on their spelling and grammar anyway. Okay. So that's how you do a quiz. So if I go to this one now, again, it's got an answer key. It's worth 1 point. Provide the feedback. It's the same. You just repeat this process over and over again. It's a little bit harder when it comes to your extended response type questions, or when they're adding a file. You just need to make sure that, let's go down here and I'll add a question that is a longer one. Okay, so why do we brush our teeth, for example? Okay, and so I can still put an answer key. This is going to be worth 3 marks. I can still give feedback based on whether it's, and here my feedback might actually be the correct answer. So you can see it's not whether it's correct or incorrect. This is actually just general feedback for this question. So the student will get this feedback. And so if I give specific feedback, we brush our teeth because blah, 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 it helps remove plaques, stops you from getting cavities, improves your oral health, etc. You can put all that into here, and then the student will see that straight away when they submit their quiz, and they'll get that feedback. So more time to begin with, but so helpful on the back end of it. So that's the beginnings of Google Forms. I will show you just the last thing with questions. So if I just scroll down a little bit, this button here that says import questions. So this is just fantastic. This is so helpful, this little button. So now when I click this is a new feature. This used to be done through an add-on, and I'll show you add-ons in a minute. But you now get to go, okay, in this form, in this quiz, or in this whatever you're going to use it for, I actually want a question that I've already written somewhere else in one of my other forms. And so I might go to this form. Okay, I want to get a question out of here. And so now here are the questions that I have in that form, and I want to just bring these two over and then import them, and then they will just get stuck into this quiz or into this form. So they were linear questions. So how did the course address the standard descriptors, and what were the best things about the course? So they were the two that were just brought in from the other Google form. And that is going to save us a lot of time as we reuse similar questions across different forms for different purposes. That really can save a lot of time. So you can see here, it's got how many points that we have for the whole form, and that's going to be our quiz. Now, I'm going to just stop here for a second and show you, you can with each of the sections you create, you can duplicate the whole section. You can do this with questions too. You can move the section up or down, or you can delete the whole section. So if I'm going through here and I want to have this question, I want more than one of these questions, I can duplicate it here, or I can move it up and down by just grabbing these three and dragging it around. And so I'll put it below this question now. You can do the same with the whole section, particularly when you get these lower sections. Right, if I grabbed it, move section, right, and now I can grab them and drag them around. So I might want section 3 there, that one down the bottom, click save, and they'll all now move. And so I can rearrange them according to how I actually want it to flow out. If I create them in the wrong order, you can easily just put them back into the right order. Now, if I jump out of here from Google Forms, because Google Forms now also exist in Google Classroom. Now, for those of you who don't know how to use Google Classroom, I've got an online course you can register for, and it will show you how to use that in a lot of depth. But here in Google Classroom, you have classwork. If I click create a quiz assignment, it will then create a brand new form here, a Google form. And if I scroll down, it's going to import the results of this form into my gradebook. And so I can give it a title here, right? Test 1, this is a pop quiz, right, on algebra or something. And so now I can click on the form and it'll just load a blank new quiz. And here I can go through, again, it's straight away, it's a quiz. See this, it's got answer keys, make them required, starts off with multiple choice, etc. I can import all my questions from another quiz, etc. It's just to show you that you can do them from within there. Do note though, you have to do it from within the classroom for that. If you do this one and then post it into Classroom, it won't do the importing and linking into your gradebook. Instead, what these ones do is if I go to responses, it says it's still accepting responses. I can turn that off. But I see here, I can generate a spreadsheet. And so all the answers to this form will then go into a spreadsheet for me. And I can go through and see how many times students have tried to have submitted responses, and see what their first result was compared to their second result, all those types of things, just straight into a spreadsheet. And I can also click here. And if I want to get an email notification every time someone submits a response to this form, I can do that. So if I select this, it means every time someone fills in the form, I get an email that says someone has filled in the form and gives me their details of what they actually filled into the form. It gives me a link to go and have a look at it. I can select the response destination. So rather than it going into a new spreadsheet, so when I click this, I can actually choose for it to go into a spreadsheet that already exists. And so I can select here, and so I might have a markbook already set up in Google Sheets. And so I can just go through and select my Google Sheet that I want it to go into, and it'll create a new tab and insert all the responses from the form into that Google Sheet. Now, I don't want to do that because I don't like creating lots of mess for myself. Further in here, I can download it. If you're still using Microsoft, you can download it as a CSV, and that will then open as an Excel document. And then you can also delete all your responses so that you now have an empty form again, ready to go for the next time that you want to use it. Now, the last thing that I want to show you before we finish up are add-ons. Now, add-ons are basically going to take a form and allow it to do more than it normally does. So if I go up here, these are my add-ons. So I click here, these are the ones I've already inserted into this document. And so when I'm worried about what's happening, I might say, all right, this is a quiz, And if the kids pass the quiz, I want them to have a certificate that says, congratulations, you passed, right? So Certify will do that for me. I'm going to click that, enable it on this quiz, get started. Okay, and so add-ons always pop up over here on the right once they've been launched. And so certification is off, let's turn it on. So now when a student's going to get a certain mark, they're going to get a particular certificate. Okay, so unable to turn on because the form shuffles question order. So if I want to use it, I have to turn off that setting. So I can go to settings and let's go to quizzes. I do not want to that presentation. Let's just untick those and turn it on so I can show you what it does. Now, we'll like to have a question that is asking for the student's name. Okay, that's one thing that we'll like to do. So if you click add a question and just put name in there, whatever the students then put in there, you can use for the form here. So I can link it to the exam or I can turn off. So certification is on, records. So this will record the records. The passing mark is 80% and they're going to get a golden template. I can click advanced and it'll give me more options around the certificate. So the email that's going to get sent. So I can actually write the email that's going to go to them. It's going to be attached as a PDF. Send email on attempt, even if it's a failed exam. So say, well done, good attempt, try again or something. Okay, and so they're going to get all this in to their certificate. You can go here for certificate records and it'll show you what the students have done. So this is just the spreadsheet that they automatically generate. And so you can see their scores and you can have a look at their certificates and all those kinds of things in there. We can link this to the exam. So this is the exam that you share with your students now for them to answer it and get their certificates emailed to them. And you can also test it, and I highly recommend you do test it, email yourself a sample. Now, if you want to know what that actually looks like, this form here, this is a test quiz, it's got it turned on. So if I click here, send, so when you want to actually share a quiz with people, you click send, and then you can either enter it all in manually or you can get a link, and then you can shorten that link, and then because you guys all have a chat, I can copy that, come down, and I'll paste that into the chat for you guys to click. And then if you get this correct, you'll get a certificate emailed to you from the Google form. And that's a really simple, nice, gamification aspect of using Google Forms with your students. Now, if you want to add an add-on, so you'll start by not having any generally. If you go to these three dots here, this is where you're going to go. So you can share your Google form, so you can have multiple people creating the form or multiple people able to create and edit and see the results of the form. You can get pre-filled links. So if you want to actually pre-fill some of the answers or some of the information for someone, so thinking of surveys, for example, that you might send around, you might pre-fill that they're a teacher, for example, as you send that out to people. You can print your form, you can make copies of your forms, but this is where you get your add-ons. So you click here for add-ons and it will load it up, and you can search through here, and there are so many different things that Google Forms can do for you through these add-ons. And so, for example, just click on this form publisher, and basically it's going to turn your form into a Google Docs, a sheet, a slide, or a PDF. Okay, and so from what people put into your Google form, it's going to produce a beautiful document as a result. Other ones that exist that are really cool are form notifications. Google now have kind of built that in a bit better, but if you want to customize the emails that get sent to students or that get sent to yourself, you can use this one. It's quite good. Form limiter I love. So form limiter enables you to basically have a maximum number of responses, or it basically means that your Google form will stop accepting responses according to a trigger that you set. So you might choose that you're going to release this form into your Google Classroom at 9 a.m. when your class starts. Let's say it's an in-class quiz. They're going to have half an hour to do this. So at 9:30, they have to have clicked their submit button. Otherwise, they cannot submit their answers to their form. And so they have half an hour to complete the exam. And they can't keep going afterwards. They can't come back to it. And it will all get recorded. And you can set these shut-off times for those forms, which is a great thing that you can do. Another one is where's Choice Eliminator. Choice Eliminator is really cool. So Choice Eliminator, particularly if you're putting kids into groups or if they've got to select a topic that they're going to look at or something like that. I know a lot of PE teachers use this for sports selection, for example. So you can put this add-on into Google Forms, and basically what it's going to do is as you create your questions, once something gets selected, let's say it gets selected 5 times, it's no longer a choice. So the other people who go to that form then cannot select that activity, or they cannot select that group or that topic to explore. Yeah, so to put your add-ons in, you go here and click add-ons, and just when you click on them, they'll tell you what they do. And that if you want, you can search for them by what they do and they'll all come up. But certify them is great. I really like certify them. Hopefully you're all starting to receive your certificates in your email inboxes as you answer this quiz. But that's a really quick, very basic guide to Google Forms. They do continue to expand and improve in terms of what they are able to do. And there are other things that you can get at the back end too in terms of what's going on in the sheet that they then export into. So you could, for example, get an add-on called Flubaroo in Google Sheets, which will then enable you to automatically grade everything, and it'll color code it for you and give you some stats that you might like to get according to the results that are in the Google Sheets. Now, I've steered away from Flubaroo lately more because Google now do their own grading within the form itself. But if you would like it all nicely placed and color coded in a spreadsheet, then Flubaroo is a great thing to use for that. I think at this point, I might let you guys go and explore. Feel free to have fun making a quiz or making a survey for your students for the end of this unit that you're going to teach them this term. But I would personally really love your feedback. And so let me see if I can share a feedback bit.ly with you really quickly so that you can give me some feedback. So if I go to slash and paste this into the chat. I would love to get your feedback on the webinar today, whether or not you found it helpful, if you thought that the ideas that I gave you from Google Forms were good ones, whether you think that they're things you'll use, maybe there's things that I missed that you really wanted me to cover. I would love to hear how I went and to get feedback so I can continue to improve what I do for you guys. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy to be able to do this for you guys this afternoon. I love the fact that you guys are doing, the best work in the world, that you guys are changing our students for the future. And I'm delighted to be able to have any kind of input into what you are doing in your classrooms, because I know, I can see a few names that I actually know personally, and I know you're doing some great things in your classrooms to really improve your students' learning and help prepare them for the future that is coming for them once they leave school. So thank you guys so much. Please provide me with that feedback. I will leave it open and on for a little bit longer so everyone gets a chance to click on that link and give me some feedback. And I wish you all the best for your weekend. Have a great time and enjoy your break, getting ready for Monday. Thank you, everyone.